Hi, I'm Jonathan Larson, I'm a sound designer, and I'm going to take some time to show you through some of the technical implementation and audio programming I did on the game Shadows Grove, made in Unreal Engine using Wise. One of the tasks I took on was designing a dynamic mixing system. Many of the combat sounds were being redesigned, and the soundscape during combat was becoming overwhelming and indistinct. I wanted to design a system that would clear out space in the mix when things got busy, while keeping the system simple enough to easily work with. Since many of the combat sounds offered important player feedback, I decided to create a system that sent the sound effects into different sub-buses, player sounds versus enemy sounds, with combat and non-combat buses for each. The combat buses use a Wise meter tied to an RTPC that controls the volume of the respective non-combat bus, lowering the volume of non-combat sounds when the more important sounds are playing. For instance, the Shade enemy's attack sound here ducks the ambient hiss the Shade makes. Similarly, the player's projectile sound ducks the volume of their movement sounds. Additionally, the drums and the combat music were contributing to a lot of low-end buildup, so I created a special auxiliary bus that collected all the SFX buses into one and filtered out everything above 160 Hz. This was used to drive a matching low shelf on the music bus, clearing up space in the music when the low end started to build up in the SFX. All of this helped make the overall soundscape of the game a bit less overwhelming, particularly in areas with multiple enemies. Another problem I solved had to do with sounds the player never even hears. Throughout the game, there are many objects such as torches, braziers, and warp points that produce ambient looping sounds at all times, but are only heard when the player is nearby. While these objects didn't represent a significant performance impact on their own, some sections of the game have several hundred of these objects loaded and playing, when the player is only capable of hearing a dozen at most at any given time. It also cluttered the Wise profiler with a huge amount of irrelevant data, making debugging a nightmare. To solve this issue, I had to come up with a solution to programmatically turn these sounds on and off at runtime so that they would only be active when the player was close enough to hear them. I had three goals when designing this. The solution should not place an additional burden on system resources with unnecessary raycasts or distance calculations. It should be generalized enough that it can be trivially implemented for any new ambient objects. And it needs to also work with the special blue flames, which start the game unlit and light as the player progresses. To accomplish this, I designed a custom Unreal blueprint that could be added as a component to any object that has such a sound. This blueprint has code that spawns an AK sound emitter with a collision sphere that can call start and stop events when the player enters or leaves its radius. The radius and Wise event names were passed as constructor parameters, which allowed for them to be defined in the editor, but not instantiated until needed, as in the case for the blue flames, which use a separate function to allow for activating the sound after play has begun. I also needed to implement an initial check to ensure the sounds would still start playing if the player spawns already within the sphere radius, as they do in the cutscene at the start of the level. A simple overlap check accounted for this edge case, and all the required functionality was achieved in a neat modular package and with virtually no system overhead. In fact, there was a noticeable improvement in CPU performance, up to 5 to 7% less in some areas. The Wise profiler was also free of detritus, and nobody would ever know this system existed had I not explained it to you just now. This was just a small part of what the audio team and I put together for this game, and I appreciate you coming along into the weeds a bit with me. Thanks for watching.